Hey, good morning, guys. We're here, Tales from the Trail again. Got Justin Chezem, the head men's soccer coach from Newport University here. Uh, Say hello, Justin, so they know your voice in case they're listening.
What's up, guys?
And then I've got Chris Norris, who's the head men's soccer coach at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. Say good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Awesome. So right before I hit record on this, we were talking about an event that you guys attended recently, and by event I mean it was a showcase, right, of boys teams, and I felt like it was appropriate for us to have a conversation to kind of hit some good points of what was done, and maybe some things where there were opportunities to improve. From a communicating to coaches standpoint, from a recruit, from a club, and that sort of thing. One of the things we were talking about right before we hit record was, each team has a pamphlet with players and a short bio. And Justin, if you can kind of describe what was in that, and then how some were a little better from your perspective than others, that would be great.
Sure. Well, first you need to hope that they have one. I've definitely sat down on a field before, and I didn't get one, which is fine. We'll eventually find out who the kid is. But in our job, especially on a big weekend, if we're watching 20 games, 30 games, depending how many staff members you have, you're gonna have to sift through, pretty quickly. If you're at a time slot when you've got, oh man, I've got 3 games this time slot, I need to see. I can't sit there watching a kid that I didn't even know couldn't even get into Newport and doesn't have the grade. So, the idea is to get a pamphlet pretty quick. Most of the teams are pretty good about having, a team manager that's kind of walking around, taking your name, taking your school, and handing you a brochure. And I love that. I love getting one pretty quickly after I sit down. And then the brochure, it has to have a few key details. I need to know your grad year is critical. I'd love to know what your GPA is. These are the couple of things that right off the top will kind of, okay, I can focus on this kid or I can move on. Norris, we were talking a little bit about this QR code thing. Some of them have a little less detail, but I think as long as you have grad year, specific position, and then contact info, I love to have the kids, if the kid's comfortable with it, of course, their cell phone number, something where I can reach out directly to the kid. I've had the brochure where every email was the DOC at this club's email address. And, it's just extra people you have to go through just to find the kid. And I get the point of it at the same time. But my favorite ones are, I've got the kid's cell phone number. I'll shoot him a text later tonight after I get home or something. Those are usually the key numbers and details that I need when I pull up a brochure.
Yeah, I would agree. I respect the fact that, some people don't want certain details or pieces of information out there. But the reality is that if you really are intent on being recruited, having your personal contact information down there or really easily accessible is critical. I mean, to get in touch with someone in a timely manner sometimes is the difference between whether you're actually recruiting somebody or not, or the inability for them to respond in a timely manner becomes the difference in whether you move forward in the process with somebody or not. Recruiting is a rapidly changing and fast moving process. And sometimes, just timing alone can be the difference in whether somebody elevates on your list or not.
I think I want to go back to Justin. You said QR code. So there's actually a QR code that can be scanned by you guys that goes to a bio. Just, giving more detail about the kid.
Sure. I mean, clear. Look, in the pamphlet, you've got a, 2-inch by 2-inch box to put some details, a picture of yourself and, your basic notes. But a lot of these kids, they'll have their own websites. They're, attached to some recruiting database or, You can click on it. Next thing it goes to their highlight videos, or that sounds awesome. That'd be something that I probably wouldn't do while I'm sitting there. This weekend was pretty cold. I had gloves on. I didn't even like bring a notebook. I just kind of kept everything tucked away because I didn't want to have my hands out. So I would have, if I really liked a kid, I identified a kid. When I go home, I'll click on his QR code, or when I, taking my lunch break or whatever. You could see the details at that point. You could see maybe they've got a little profile that they're talking about, a little more details of what they want to study, or where they come from, or what their background is and their playing background. Maybe they came from another club or something. I've seen that in some of their details, some of their highlights that they've done. So, a lot of these kids have a 2 or 3 page profile connected to a website. So it's great to be able to access that pretty quickly.
And where does that information live? Is it on their own website, or is it where is it?
I mean, it can vary. Like Justin mentioned, some kids have their own website, that they've created or that exists as part of a larger service. There are also, I've seen team managers, for example, that just have one QR code. They don't even have a paper brochure. They just have a QR code, and you have the brochure on your phone. The ability with individual QR codes, like Justin said, you just have the ability to provide more detailed information for each individual player.
You guys were saying earlier, might have been before we were recording, that you like this event, particularly because it was on at one site, right? Where you didn't have to move around and you had the ability to see everybody you wanted to see, I'm assuming. So kind of talk about the event and, obviously without getting into specifics, what made kids stand out, what was maybe detrimental to a kid that maybe you were there to see. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I'll take that. Sure. So, our situations, Justin and my situation, are somewhat similar in that we're both coaching at state universities. So that immediately sort of changes the dynamic of who we're trying to see, who we're trying to recruit. We're often going to be focused, at least for large parts of the process, on in-state student athletes. This particular event had a lot of in-state and regional teams. It was not so big that we were scrambling and trying to watch, in each time slot, for example. So to adequately cover a particular time slot, even with just one coach there, which in our cases, we both had 2 coaches at the event. But even with one coach, you could probably adequately cover the event and feel like you got a lot of meaningful evaluations done. It fit our niche, schools in terms of what we're looking for. Having the quality was good. I mean, the quality of teams was good. So you didn't feel like, you were going several time slots where just wasn't really anyone to see for either of us. And, we're looking for a lot of similar players, but at the high end, I'm probably looking for a different type of guy than Justin is in some occasions. And, I felt like we could accomplish that as a Division I school. We could accomplish that at this particular event. Plus the lack of number of teams allows us in that situation to focus maybe on a specific team for full games, which is nice. I mean, you can really drill down on a specific team or even on specific individual student athletes when you're not scrambling around trying to cover, 4, 5, 6 games in a particular time slot. And you don't feel as if you're missing out, if you do decide to watch a full game of a particular team or of a particular kid. So, I mean, this is really information that is probably more directed at club directors, club coaches, maybe even team managers or parent groups that are somewhat involved in deciding, what events really make sense for our team. But those are things that you want to be thinking about. And if you can, like, that shouldn't be the only type of event that you go to. And if you're involved in an organized league, it won't be. But if you're talking about just kind of what are good outside showcases to be looking at to supplement maybe the larger league events that we're going to, or the playoff events that we might be attending, then this would be the type of thing that would make sense, certainly for teams that are either in-state teams or teams that are relatively local regionally.
Yeah, this was a little bit smaller event than, the one up the road, the Jefferson Cup. I mean, it's a massive event, and the ECNL showcases are usually pretty big, and both those events are more nationwide events. And this one was smaller, like Chris had mentioned, was the, one location had 3 fields, and then there was another location 10 minutes away that had a couple fields as well. And so 10 minutes away is an easy drive. That's something you could do in between games. And, we've been to the events where, oh, great, they're across town, or they're on the other side of this big city. It's going to take me 45 to an hour to get there, and then I got to come right back. And 2 hours, that's, as Chris has said, if we got 2 coaches and we spread out properly, that could be 4 or 5 games that we're missing. And so, if the tournament's really spread out, it makes it difficult on us. This event allowed for us to kind of stay in one shop. I love there's only 3 fields. Like Chris had mentioned, being able to see a whole game is awesome. Did a good job too of keeping, it wasn't just all, 06s at one time or all the 04 or 05s at one time. They spread it out a little bit. So if you're still really heavy on this class right now, you could go watch a game that's filled with seniors. And if you think that, I'm ready to start working on the next class, well, there was an 06 game where it was mostly juniors and a few sophomores. You can start, really looking ahead. So, and that's this time of year. A lot of people are wrapping up their classes now and starting to make their list for next year. And, at this type of event, it allowed us to do both.
Cool. Wanted to ask about some things that were advantageous for kids, student athletes who reached out to you beforehand, and what they did specifically to garner some attention from you guys, or put them on your radar, so to speak, so that you wanted to see that maybe you hadn't heard of them, or maybe you hadn't seen them before, and they reached out to you prior, and you were intrigued enough to check them out while you're at the event.
Sure. I mean, if they sent an email or a note, this is the type of event where, oh, cool, you're playing at this time slot. There's only one other game that I'd really like to see during that time slot. That this was the type of event where, all right, this kid wrote us. I'm definitely going to go over there and watch him play. Chris and I have chatted about how we'll go to these big events and we'll get hundreds of emails leading up to the event. And in one time slot, in order to see everybody, I'd probably be able to average about 12 minutes a game. And it just doesn't work. And the smaller event allowed that to happen this weekend. So, we just had an ID camp as well. Chris and I co-host an ID camp. And so a few of those kids were, hey, I was just at your ID camp, and, we identified them there. So we're able to see them pretty quickly, a quick turnaround. So that was definitely a bonus for these kids. And, this one being smaller allowed us to kind of do a little more homework on the front end and see, like, oh, watch a little bit of film on this kid ahead of time. So I like what I saw, and I'm going to make sure I watch his game this weekend. It definitely made it easier. I think Chris hit the nail on the head. This is, you can't just do these types of events, but you also can't just do the big events where you might get lost in the crowd. Being able to mix it up and do a few of each is going to really be beneficial for you, especially if you're, this is mostly, like Chris had mentioned, a regional area tournament. So most of the teams that were there were Virginia or Maryland based, and this is where most of our kids are coming from. So it was definitely a perfect event for that.
Yeah, and that was represented or that was reflected in the schools that were represented at the event too. It was primarily schools that were within, a 3-hour radius, and it was not a huge showing in terms of the number of schools there. But I think as far as the type of school that's most likely for the kids attending the event, it was a really good pairing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the niche matched. I mean, most of those kids made sense for most of our schools. And so it's, we were talking about actually, a couple other schools. If you hadn't started recruiting yet for this class for whatever reason, there was a lot of great talent there. And most of those kids made sense regionally and academically. And you still could do plenty of recruiting.
in cases like this, should a kid have the expectation that they're going to actually get some FaceTime with you at an event like this, or is that kind of unlikely? Um, you know, where does that happen? You know what I mean? Um,
Well, it's partly a rules question. So, and it differs for Justin and I. As a Division One coach, I'm not allowed to have face-to-face contact with student athletes at the event. The only way that we could potentially do that would be at the conclusion of the event. If a kid is age appropriate, we could, once their coach has released them from the field or from the venue after their final game of the weekend, then we could potentially have some contact. That doesn't really happen very often, though, unless we know the kid prior and we've set it up, before the weekend, where we say, hey, look, we've seen you on several occasions. We're going to be up there after your final game and your coach has released you. We'd like to have a conversation with you. Maybe let's meet at Starbucks down the road or something like that in the process with an individual. I think Justin's rules at the Division III level are a little bit different.
Yeah, as long as they're dismissed, like I can't obviously pull a kid off the bench or something like that. But once their game is concluded and the coach's like, all right, go home. Technically we're allowed, but I'm kind of in the same boat. I really, not that I don't want to speak to the kids. I just, I'm there to go watch some games, and unless it was something where I'm recruiting the kid heavily and I needed to kind of touch base with them about something, or sometimes the kid's like, hey, my mom's going to be there, she didn't get to meet you on the visit, so something like that. That's happened before. After a game, I'll definitely say hi to you. We've all had kids come up to us while we're recruiting just to come shake our hand and say hello and thanks for coming. But I'm kind of in the same boat as Chris. I think a lot of schools are the same way, where they like to keep the face-to-face contact minimal, and especially at the event. It's like, we're taking these notes. We're gonna call you. We're gonna come after you afterwards. But
right. And what should a kid do after the event? Like, he knew that you were there, and there's a high interest level on their end. How do they reach out to you? What do they ask? And lead them to a decision to continue to pursue you, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with timing too. Just first of all, give it a day or two. Let us go home. Let us, compare notes with our staff and kind of take care of our side of things. If this is the first time I saw you play, I'm probably not going to have much, especially if you're a junior or a sophomore. Like, just we're taking notes. We're gonna hunt you down. There's a lot of people we watched. If it's far along, though, there's a few kids that I say, I'm going to come watch you play, and I'm going to make a decision after this weekend. Well, it's time to get an answer from me. It's time to shoot me a call, shoot me a text or email, whatever we've been communicating, and say, hey, I know you came to my game. I appreciate that, and let's have that dialogue. If I didn't already initiate that conversation, within a few days after the event, if you're in that category where it's kind of decision time, then it's time to reach out and say, hey, I'd like to kind of narrow this down and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add to that. Just, I think it's perfectly acceptable if it's a school that you have a genuine interest in to reach out afterwards and just ask if, the coach was able to see you in a meaningful way. Don't ask for a full evaluation of your play. I mean, that's just not feasible within the ask. Were you able to see me? Did you see enough to have any kind of idea about whether this might be worth pursuing or not? If it would be worth me trying to get in front of you again, whether that's sending you video, my schedule, my future schedule, or attending an ID camp. I think those are all, good questions to ask. But if don't ask to get on a phone call, don't ask for a full evaluation. If time permitting and interest permitting, the coaches will offer those kinds of things to you. But I think it's completely fair for a prospective student athlete to ask, like, did you see enough of me to have any idea about whether it's worth continuing to have a discussion?
Yeah, there was actually, to tie in the last two topics, there was a kid that we were interested in, that we've been watching, and he came to our ID camp, and we liked what we saw, but we wanted to see him with his team in the full 11 environment and being asked what his coach likes to ask. And so we told him we'll see him at the next event, and then we'll talk to him. And so the dialogue was there on the front end. He came up actually right after the game and shook my hand and said thanks for coming. And then we spoke a few days later on our final thoughts, our final evaluation on the kid. So he was able to tie it all in, and that it worked out really well for both parties.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. Any other kind of anecdotes that can kind of from the weekend that would be good to share on either one of your parts?
I'll tell you, my favorite game to watch was Coach Norris over here versus his old college teammate. They got after. We got the best result we could possibly get there, a tie. So everybody's still happy. Both teams played pretty well too. It was a fun game to watch.
Well, I happen to know the other coach, and happy. I don't know.
You and I should have sat right there in between them and just thrown in a bunch of garbage, just trash talk the whole time.
Yeah, that was the best possible result, especially for him.
He's not here to sling back at you. So.
I mean, I did, not that this is that helpful or not, but I saw a guy that I thought was pretty decent player, and then he got frustrated and put in a horror tackle and got a straight red card, and I mean that pretty much eliminated him from consideration. So
yeah, I mean, you guys said it in the first time we did this. Someone's always watching, right? So
it seems like the ones that create the biggest red flags will be right after a kid scores. It's interesting, you're so happy for him, or he's like pumped, especially if it's a big goal. And I'll tell you what, I've seen some interesting reactions after a goal. Like, oh, that's a card at our level pretty quickly, So, we're definitely watching. It's funny how they'll come right up to your, we're sitting on the sidelines close to the corner flag sometimes, and I don't know why that's where most soccer players like to celebrate, but we've definitely seen some interesting celebrations there.
Yeah, some inappropriate type celebrations that their mothers are blushing about. Yeah. Cool. I mean, if you guys don't have anything else to share, I think this has been helpful. It's a short one, but that's fine too. You guys have anything else that, I know you do this pretty much every weekend, so everything seems ordinary to you, but.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Chris has been training, Division I's been training. They've got, he can probably speak on, the amount of hours and everything that they're allowed to do, but he's been able to watch his players. And this is something that I've been telling kids right now, mostly juniors, but there's a few seniors that we're still talking to that I give them this information. It's really important. I have not seen my kids play since November when we were still training and in the NCAA tournament. I haven't seen them, I've seen them around the office and hanging out, but not on the soccer field. I'm not allowed to. And so, there are a few kids that maybe didn't play that much in the fall that are going to get a huge chunk of the spring, and it's going to be critical for their evaluation. And, if we're going to move forward with them or if we're going to need to go find somebody else to compete against that person. And, but I haven't seen them yet. And so, we check in March 13th for our first practice, and, I'm going to need a few weeks with that guy, and I'm going to see kind of what they're offering, and we might be changing a position or moving our scheme around a little bit. And so there are just things about my own team that I'm still trying to figure out. And to move into my 24 roster already when I'm still having questions as to what I have in house right now, it's a patience thing. It's one of those where I've told a lot of kids this, like, look, I think I'm going to need this, but I have a guy in house that might work out. So, give me the spring. It's a month, March 13th, and then we play Chris on April 15th. So we get that, 34 days or whatever it is to see our guys, and we'll make some evaluations at that point. And then, the timing's good because we'll have the big tournaments coming up after that with the Jeff Cup and the big ECNL events and a few more off events. And then we have our ID camp, but I'll know my team. I'll know exactly what I'm bringing in terms of at least returners for the fall at that time. And that's most D3 teams are going to be in that boat.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's actually really timely for us as well. I mean, for this recruiting cycle, we need probably 12 guys or so. We have 9 commitments right now, so we're still trying to fill some spots for this year. And ironically, right before we got on this podcast, I got off the phone with a coach who has a kid that we've been engaged with for a while now, who I really like as a player. And based on kind of the way things have been going with us in training and how we're viewing our returning group for the fall, I had to tell the guy, like, I'm just not sure that this position is as high a priority as it has been for the last 2 months, and so things can change all the time. Sometimes positively and sometimes in a way that might affect a certain kid, negatively if he's really interested in a particular school. So having patience and being persistent is really important.
And I imagine that the persistence level, you have to like walk that line of being too casual and being a little over aggressive about it. So,
Right.
Use common sense there, I guess. Yeah. Awesome. I appreciate it. So, you guys have anything else before I hit stop?
That's good.
Cool. All right. I'm going to stop.
See you on the